It all started as an ordinary afternoon, one that spiraled into an unimaginable series of events. My sister, Marianne, had just stopped by my house for a casual visit, but what she didn't expect was to find herself thrown into handcuffs by the HOA's so-called enforcers. These so-called officers were clearly driven by a personal vendetta, their eyes cold and filled with an air of superiority. But what they didn't realize was that Marianne, with her calm and composed demeanor, was harboring a secret that would unravel everything. When the Secret Service arrived, their smirks faded, replaced by sheer terror. The story that follows is where everything started to change. Before we dive into the heart of the matter, if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. If you're enjoying this, leave a comment or press 1 to let me know. Your feedback fuels my passion to share more of these stories. Growing up, I had a naive idea of what a neighborhood should be. It should be a place of comfort where you greet your neighbors with a smile, borrow a cup of sugar, and watch over each other's kids. But that idea was shattered the moment I moved to Silver Pine Lane. At first glance, the neighborhood seemed like the perfect suburban dream. Pristine asphalt streets, lined with manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges. Newly divorced, I was looking for peace, somewhere I could regain my balance. Marianne lived just 2 blocks away and had encouraged me to move here, assuring me that it was a close-knit and safe community. But beneath the surface, this neighborhood wasn't the utopia it appeared to be. The Homeowners Association, HOA, was notorious for its overbearing rules, which turned what should have been simple contracts into absurd, detailed agreements. They controlled everything from the color of your fence to how long your trash bins could stay on the curb. I was just hoping for a quiet life, but I quickly learned that the HOA strictness was far from just an inconvenience. It was harassment. My grass grew half an inch too tall, or the vines on my lattice fence threatened to encroach on my neighbor's property. It felt like a constant barrage of warnings. I kept telling myself to comply, thinking that if I played by their rules and kept my head down, things would eventually calm down. But the truth is, you can't avoid tyranny forever. Marianne was the one who noticed it first. Despite her age gap, she was 3 years older. She'd always been my confidant. She had a quiet, dynamic personality, gentle but firm when needed. She had served overseas in the Peace Corps, and it shaped her ability to handle difficult situations with diplomacy. But when it came to standing up against injustice, she was a force. When I started venting about the HOA's unreasonable behavior, she was the first to encourage me to stand up for myself. "Let's see who's pulling the strings," she said. "If they're abusing their power, we'll expose them." That moment came faster than we expected. Silver Pine Lane had an unusual setup. The HOA had its own enforcement squad, self-titled as the HOA Cops. These individuals were supposed to uphold the community guidelines, but in reality, they acted like a private police force, uniformed and walking with arrogance. They seemed to see the neighborhood as their own personal domain, especially when dealing with women. I had seen them act unprofessionally before, but I had never imagined it would escalate to this. One Saturday afternoon, Marianne came over upset. A friend of hers, Shelby, had told her that the HOA cops had trespassed onto her property without cause. Shelby's teenage son had been dared by classmates to rummage through the community dumpster for a lost cell phone. The next thing they knew, the HOA cops were swarming their yard, threatening fines and arrests. Arresting a kid for stepping into the dumpster area seemed absurd, but it was just another example of their overreach. Marianne and I sat on the porch talking it over. She looked at me with determination in her eyes, the same determination I'd known since we were kids. "We'll find out who's in charge and shine a light on them," she said. Just as we were talking, a commotion outside caught our attention. We rushed to the porch and saw 2 HOA enforcers standing in the yard. One was short and stocky, the other tall and wiry. They both wore sneers as they pointed at Marianne. "You there," the short one barked. "Are you the homeowner?" "No," Marianne said calmly, "but I'm the homeowner's sister." "Then you're trespassing," the short enforcer declared. "On my sister's property?" Marianne's voice carried a disbelief that matched mine. "That doesn't make sense." The tall one chimed in. Our records show that only homeowners or registered residents can be here without prior permission. If you're not on the lease or deed, you need written clearance from the HOA. Marianne let out a half laugh. This is my sister's house. I'm here as a guest. You can't just make me leave. The short enforcer puffed up, stepping closer to her. You don't understand. We have authority here. If you resist, we can place you under HOA arrest. Arrest? I stepped forward, my voice sharp with disbelief. Under what legal authority? The short enforcer turned to me. We have cause to believe she's been inciting neighbors to break HOA policies, distributing unapproved flyers, and harassing our officers. It all sounded ridiculous. First, I had never seen Marianne hand out any flyers, and even if she had, how was that grounds for arrest? Marianne folded her arms, her voice low but resolute. I want to see the statute that gives you the right to do this. Without another word, the short cop pulled out a pair of handcuffs, the metal glinting under the hot sun. If you don't come quietly, we'll proceed with immediate detention. The HOA board has granted us this authority. My stomach twisted in panic. You can't do this, I protested, stepping in front of Marianne. But before I could stop them, the tall enforcer shoved me aside. I stumbled, but regained my footing just in time to see them pin Marianne's arms behind her back. She didn't struggle. She just stared at them, memorizing their faces. My heart raced. Were they really going to cart her off? To where? The HOA's makeshift holding facility? I felt helpless as they dragged her away, leaving me standing there, stunned and powerless. That was the day everything changed. My desire for peace gave way to a darker resolve, a need for justice, maybe even revenge. I raced to the HOA's community center, a squat building near the tennis courts. Inside, a scene of chaos greeted me. Marianne was locked in a small office turned makeshift detention room, guarded by a few enforcers, arms crossed. I demanded to see her, but the taller enforcer from before blocked my way. She'll remain here until further notice, he said, until she cooperates. Cooperate with what? My voice trembled in frustration. She's been meddling in HOA affairs, he explained. We'll question her, and if she agrees to abide by our rules, we might let her go, with a fine. It was insane. I tried calling the local police, but they refused to intervene. It's a civil matter, they said. If you have a complaint, file a report. Helpless and furious, I realized my options were slim. That's when I noticed a man standing in the corner, wearing a dark suit. He was older, with peppered hair, and his presence radiated authority. We locked eyes briefly, and I thought there was a flicker of recognition in his gaze, but he quickly looked away, returning to his phone. I was ushered out of the building, but I wasn't about to give up. I left, determined to find a way to free Marianne. That night, I called every contact I could think of, but most were too afraid to help. Some people in the neighborhood expressed sympathy, but were too scared to speak out. I knew I needed more facts before I could make a move. Around 2 a.m., I finally fell asleep on the couch, phone in hand. The next morning, a pounding on my door woke me with a jolt. My heart dropped, expecting the HOA enforcers, but when I opened the door, I was met with 3 men in dark suits. Secret Service, one of them said, flashing a badge. May we come in? I stood frozen, my mind racing. Why on earth was the Secret Service at my door? The man who introduced himself as Agent Corbin seemed on edge. We're searching for a woman named Marianne. We were told she was seen in this neighborhood. I hesitated, fear rising in my chest. Yes, she's my sister, but the HOA has her in custody. The words left my mouth, and for a moment, I realized how absurd they sounded. Agent Corbin's face hardened as he processed this. Your Homeowners Association has her in custody? He repeated, his voice deadly serious. We need to see her, now, he insisted. Without question, I led them across the street and down 2 blocks to the community center. The residents on their morning walk stopped in their tracks when they saw the Secret Service agents. I could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. The storm was coming. As we approached the community center, the sight of black SUVs rolling in behind us quickly turned heads. Word spread fast, and by the time we reached the center, a small crowd had already gathered. The once confident HOA enforcers, who typically strutted around with their self-improvement swagger, now stood nervously at the entrance, their usual bravado evaporating under the cold, steady gaze of the federal agents. The change was instantaneous. Gone were the smirks and cocky attitudes, replaced by pale faces and uncertainty. Agent Corbin stepped forward, his voice commanding and unwavering. "We have reason to believe you are unlawfully detaining a federal witness. Stand aside." The short enforcer's jaw twitched. For a moment, it seemed like he might try to resist. Time seemed to slow down, but then he cleared his throat. "We need to see some ID," he mumbled, his tone no longer confident. Corbin flashed his credentials with a practiced flick, and the enforcer nearly staggered back in shock. "All right, this way," he muttered, barely above a whisper. We made our way down the hallway, and when we reached the cramped office, the sight of Marianne, still handcuffed to a metal chair, hit me like a punch in the gut. Her eyes lit up when she saw Agent Corbin, and she let out a sigh of relief. "Thank heavens," she breathed. One of the Secret Service agents rushed to unlock her cuffs. I watched as the enforcers backed against the wall, panic etched on their faces. The man in the suit from the day before was there too, arms crossed, silent. My entire body trembled with relief as Marianne stood, her wrists raw from the cuffs. Corbin turned to face the man in the suit. "I've been looking for you, Campbell. You've gone off the grid." "Quite the job," he said, his voice dripping with authority. The tension in the room skyrocketed. The man, Campbell, wasn't just some bystander. He was someone the Secret Service had been tracking. Campbell didn't respond. He stood there, silently, refusing to acknowledge the looming danger. Corbin then turned to Marianne. "We got your message. We came as soon as we could. Are you all right?" Marianne nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Better now that you're here." My mind raced, confusion swirling. How did Marianne know the Secret Service? What was her connection to all this? Before I could voice my questions, the HOA enforcers attempted to slink away. "Not so fast," Agent Corbin snapped. "You're all staying put until local law enforcement arrives." The enforcers' faces drained of color as they realized the game was up. Their illusion of power crumbled under the weight of genuine federal authority. Within the hour, local police who had previously brushed me off arrived in full force. The community center became a flurry of flashing lights as officers questioned the HOA enforcers, forcing them to account for their actions. Eventually, they were all cuffed and marched out under suspicion of unlawful detention. As they were led away, one thing became clear. The puppet master, the elusive HOA president, Kyle Beck, was nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Marianne and I were escorted back to my house by Agent Corbin and his partner. Inside, he offered her a glass of water, and they spoke quietly. My nerves were on edge, and curiosity burned inside me. Finally, I blurted out, "What is going on? Marianne, how do you know the Secret Service? Why did they come for you?" Marianne exhaled deeply, her shoulders sagging. "I've been working with them informally," she said. "The man, Campbell, was suspected of forging documents and funneling funds to extremist groups. I recognized him a few months ago at a local event. I discreetly reached out to the authorities." I was floored. "So the man in the suit had been forging documents?" She nodded. "He was posing as an HOA consultant, infiltrating the community's finances. The HOA, or at least certain high-level members, were benefiting from shady deals. That's why they were so determined to keep prying eyes away, including mine. They accused me of meddling when all I did was try to uncover what was happening behind the scenes." Agent Corbin chimed in. "We suspect that Campbell, along with Kyle Beck, was using the HOA as a front to launder money. They were threatening residents with fines and property seizures, acquiring cash under the radar. Marianne's efforts to help her neighbors set off alarms for them. Realization hit me like a ton of bricks. That's why Marianne had always wanted to gather evidence but keep it quiet. She had suspected something big was going on." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to drag you into this mess. I had to wait until I could contact Corbin safely, but then the HOA targeted me and I lost control of the situation. The frustration, relief, and anger simmered inside me. This had escalated from an absurd HOA power struggle to something far darker, a criminal conspiracy. What about the revenge we wanted? I muttered, remembering how powerless I had felt when they locked Marianne up, but then I looked at her freed wrists and the fresh bruises, and a shift occurred in me. The best revenge, I realized, was justice. Over the next few days, the fallout was swift and dramatic. Campbell was arrested, and local news outlets exploded with stories of the HOA scandal. Some called it a fiasco, others a tragedy. The entire HOA board resigned amidst investigations for fraud and misconduct. The enforcers who locked up Marianne were charged with unlawful detention and intimidation. But the true mastermind, Kyle Beck, vanished, allegedly fleeing in the dead of night. There were rumors of sightings in neighboring towns, but no one could pin him down. The Secret Service put out bulletins, but Beck's whereabouts remained a mystery. As the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief, the oppressive regime of the HOA seemed to dissolve overnight. Yet, I couldn't find peace. Not until Beck was caught and made to answer for his actions. Marianne was my anchor during the media frenzy. The swarm of journalists had us both on edge, but we stuck together, refusing to speak publicly until the dust settled. Some neighbors approached us, praising our courage, while others cursed us for ruining the neighborhood's reputation. The latter response was laughable. What reputation was there to save? One evening, I found Marianne hunched over a thick folder at the kitchen table. "What's all this?" I asked gently. She looked up, eyes somber. "Evidence," she replied. Shelby and a few others gathered financial records that the HOA had forcibly taken from them. "It's enough to show the money trail to Beck. If I can piece it together, maybe the feds can track him down." I felt a pang of concern. "Is that safe? Shouldn't you let Agent Corbin handle it?" "I will," she sighed, "but I don't trust them to connect all the dots. I need to do this for everyone who suffered under Beck's reign. I can't rest until he stopped." Her words sparked something in me. All the humiliation, the intimidation, and the hopelessness I had felt over the years. Beck was the mastermind behind it all. He had turned a peaceful community into a fortress of fear. He arrested my sister. He made me quake in my own home. He was the reason I had never felt safe. But now the tables had turned, and I wanted to make sure Beck never felt safe again. "I'm with you," I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Over the next few weeks, we spent every free moment hunched over documents and bank statements, property deeds, and suspicious wire transfers. Marianne had a knack for spotting irregularities from her Peace Corps days and her work with nonprofits. She identified patterns in the money movements, suspect charities receiving transfers like clockwork. We discovered that those charities were shell organizations tied to extremist groups. The deeper we dug, the more outraged we became. The HOA's petty tyranny was just a small part of a larger criminal operation. We had to end it. A month after the initial bust, a contact from the local police tipped us off. Beck had been spotted in a small town 2 hours away. He was using a fake name, but someone recognized him from the news broadcast. I immediately called Agent Corbin, but he was occupied with other leads, too slow for my liking. An unstoppable resolve ignited in me. Marianne was hesitant at first when I suggested we go after him ourselves to confirm his location, but I couldn't shake the images of her in handcuffs and the torment the neighbors had suffered. I was done being a victim. I wanted closure. "I'm tired of feeling like a victim," I said. "I want closure." Marianne understood, so we devised a plan. We left at dawn, hearts racing like we were on some covert mission. Her phone rang incessantly with calls from Agent Corbin, but we silenced them. We were determined to handle this ourselves. The tipster had said Beck was staying at a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. We arrived after hours of driving, pulling up to a shabby place with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. My stomach churned. We scanned the parking lot for the distinctive face we had only seen in official photos: broad forehead, hawkish nose, eyes that glinted with cruelty. After what felt like an eternity, Beck emerged from one of the rooms. He looked different, wearing a baseball cap and baggy clothes, but I recognized him immediately. My sister and I exchanged a brief glance, and she pressed 911 on her phone, but didn't call yet. We planned to confirm his identity and then alert the authorities. But life rarely follows the plan. As we moved in closer, Beck suddenly turned his head, his face twisting in recognition. Without warning, he sprinted across the parking lot. Panic surged through me, but my body moved on instinct. Marianne and I gave chase, yelling, "Stop!" as though we had any real authority. Beck veered around a corner into an alley, and we followed, adrenaline spiking. My feet pounded against the pavement, my chest burning. I nearly tripped, but Marianne steadied me. We rounded the corner, and there he was, cornered by a chain-link fence. He glared at us, snarling. "What do you want?" Marianne raised her phone and snapped a photo. "We have proof of your crimes. It's over, Beck." His eyes flicked to her phone, and he lunged, trying to grab it. For a moment, I feared he would strike her, but a flash of memory jolted me. The image of my sister bound to that chair. Rage exploded inside me. I stepped in front of Marianne, shoving him back. He stumbled, hitting the fence with a loud clang. "You ruin people's lives," I spat, trembling with fury. "You lock my sister up, threaten innocent neighbors, and now you're trying to run away?" Beck glared at me, his face contorted with hate. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he snarled. I was finally ready to make him pay. As we approached the community center, I could see the black SUVs pulling in behind us, their tires screeching on the pavement. The news spread quickly, and by the time we arrived, a small crowd had gathered. The usual HOA enforcers, who typically carried themselves with an air of superiority, stood near the entrance. But today their swagger had evaporated, and they looked pale and unsure. The presence of federal agents was enough to strip them of their usual confidence. Agent Corbin took a step forward, his voice firm and commanding. "We have reason to believe you are holding a federal witness and violating her civil rights. Stand down." The short enforcer's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, I thought he might resist. Time seemed to freeze. Then, with a heavy sigh, he cleared his throat. "We need to see some ID," he muttered, his tone no longer sure of itself. Corbin flashed his credentials with a practiced flick of the wrist, and the enforcer nearly staggered backward. "All right, this way," he mumbled, defeated. We followed him down the hallway. When we reached the cramped office, my heart sank at the sight of Marianne, still handcuffed to a cold metal chair, but as soon as she saw Agent Corbin, her face lit up with relief. "Thank heavens," she whispered. One of the agents quickly unlocked her cuffs. I watched as the enforcers pressed themselves against the walls, fear written all over their faces. The man in the suit from the day before stood silently in the corner, arms crossed. My body shook with relief as Marianne stood up, her wrists raw from the cuffs. Corbin turned toward the man in the suit. "I've been looking for you, Campbell. You've done quite the job hiding. You won't get away now." The tension in the room shot up. This man Campbell wasn't just an innocent bystander, he was someone the Secret Service had been tracking for a long time. He remained silent, his eyes betraying his unease. Corbin then focused on Marianne. "We got your message. We came as soon as we could. Are you all right?" Marianne nodded, rubbing her wrists. "Better now that you're here." I stood frozen, confusion swirling in my mind. How did Marianne know the Secret Service? What had she gotten herself involved in? Before I could ask, the remaining enforcers tried to slip away, but Corbin's sharp voice stopped them. "Not so fast. You're all staying put until local law enforcement arrives." Their faces drained of color as they realized they had no more leverage. Their illusion of control vanished under the authority of the federal agents. The next hour was a blur. Local police, who had dismissed me earlier, arrived in force, responding to the Secret Service's call. The community center became a hive of flashing lights and hurried officers. The HOA enforcers were questioned and soon arrested for unlawful detention and intimidation. Some of them muttered about just following orders, but the real puppet master, Kyle Beck, was nowhere to be found. Marianne and I were escorted back to my house by Agent Corbin and his partner. Inside, he offered Marianne a glass of water, and the two spoke in quiet tones. My curiosity was burning. Finally, I couldn't keep it in any longer. What's going on? How do you know the Secret Service? Why did they come for you? Marianne took a deep breath, her shoulders sinking as she exhaled. I've been working with them informally, she said softly. Campbell was suspected of forging documents and funneling funds to extremist groups. I spotted him a few months ago at a local event, and I reached out to the authorities. I was in shock. So the guy in the suit was involved in forging documents? She nodded. Yes, he posed as an HOA consultant working his way into the community's finances. Certain high-ranking members of the HOA were involved in shady dealings. That's why they were so eager to silence me. They accused me of meddling, but all I did was try to look into their finances. Agent Corbin spoke up. We suspect that Campbell, along with Kyle Beck, was using the HOA as a front to launder money. They were threatening residents with fines and property seizures, collecting cash under the radar. Marianne's attempts to help the neighbors set off alarms for them. My mind was reeling. It all made sense now. Marianne had always wanted to gather evidence quietly because she suspected something much bigger was happening. She nodded. I didn't want to pull you into this, but once they targeted me, I had no choice. I lost control of the situation. The anger, frustration, and relief simmered in me. What started as a petty HOA dispute had turned into something much darker, a criminal conspiracy on a massive scale. I muttered, what about the revenge we wanted? I remembered all the times I had felt powerless. But then I looked at my sister, her bruised wrists fading, and I realized that the best revenge wasn't vengeance, it was justice. The following days were filled with swift action. Campbell was arrested, and the local news went wild with stories about the HOA scandal. Some people called it a fiasco, while others called it a tragedy. The entire HOA board resigned amid investigations for fraud and misconduct. The enforcers who had locked up Marianne were arrested and charged with unlawful detention. But Beck, the true mastermind, was still on the run. Marianne and I stuck together through it all, refusing to speak publicly until we had all the facts. Some neighbors praised us for our courage, while others cursed us for tarnishing the neighborhood's reputation. The latter opinion was laughable. What reputation had it even had? One evening, I found Marianne sitting at the kitchen table, bent over a thick folder. What's all this? I asked gently. She looked up, her eyes somber. Evidence, she replied. Shelby and a few others gathered financial records the HOA took from them. This is enough to show the money trail to Beck. If I can piece it together, maybe the feds can catch him. My heart skipped a beat. Is that safe? Shouldn't you let Agent Corbin handle it? I will, she sighed, but I don't trust them to connect all the dots. I need to do this for everyone who suffered under Beck's rule. I can't rest until he's caught. Her words struck something deep inside me. All the fear, the humiliation, and the anger I'd felt for so long, they were all tied to Beck, the man who had turned our peaceful neighborhood into a fortress of fear. He had made my sister's life a nightmare. But now the tables had turned. He would never make anyone feel afraid again. I'm with you, I said, placing a hand on her shoulder. For the next few weeks, we immersed ourselves in documents, bank statements, property deeds, wire transfers. Marianne's experience from her Peace Corps days helped her spot patterns in the data. She uncovered a series of shell organizations linked to extremist groups with money flowing through them like clockwork. As we dug deeper, the true scale of the corruption became clear. The HOA's petty tyranny was just a small part of a much larger criminal operation. We had to end it. A month after the initial bust, a contact from the local police tipped us off that Beck had been spotted in a small town 2 hours away. He was using a fake name, but someone had recognized him from the news. I immediately called Agent Corbin, but he was tied up with other leads. It was too slow for me. A newfound resolve burned in me. Marianne was hesitant at first when I suggested we go after him ourselves. just to confirm his location before alerting the authorities. "It's dangerous," she warned, but I was tired of waiting, tired of feeling like a victim. "I want closure," I told her. Marianne understood. We made a plan. At dawn, we drove to the town where Beck was supposedly hiding. The tipster had said he was staying at a rundown motel. When we arrived, we found the place. Peeling paint, a flickering neon sign, and an almost empty parking lot. My stomach churned. We searched the area for his face. Broad forehead, hawkish nose, cruel eyes. After what seemed like an eternity, Beck stepped out of her room. He was wearing a baseball cap and baggy clothes, but I recognized him immediately. We exchanged a quick glance, and Marianne dialed 911, but didn't press call. We had a plan to confirm his identity first, and then notify the authorities. But plans rarely go as expected. Beck turned toward us, his eyes narrowing with recognition. Without warning, he bolted, sprinting across the parking lot. My heart dropped into my stomach, but my body reacted before I could think. Marianne and I chased after him, yelling, "Stop!" like we had any real authority. He turned into an alley and we followed, adrenaline surging. My feet pounded the pavement as my chest burned. I almost stumbled, but Marianne steadied me. We turned the corner, and there he was, trapped by a chain link fence. He glared at us, sneering. "What do you want?" Marianne raised her phone and snapped a photo. "We have proof of your crimes. It's over, Beck." He lunged toward her, trying to grab her phone. For a split second, I thought he was going to strike her, but the memory of her bound to that chair pushed me forward. Rage exploded inside me. I shoved him back, making him stumble into the fence with a loud clang. "You ruined people's lives," I hissed, shaking with fury. "You locked my sister up, threatened innocent neighbors, and now you're running away." Beck's eyes burned with hatred as he glared at me. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But now the tables had turned, and Beck was going to pay.